Feminism has done it. The patriarchy defeated. Women now run the military-industrial complex. So if you want to tell me that society is run for and by men to benefit men, I'm gonna have to say you're wrong. If you're gonna tell me that if a woman took over there wouldn't be war, I'm gonna have to say you're wrong, because I actually believe that people are for the most part equal, and that interests aren't. I believe that the differences between people like gender, race, national origin are minor compared to what makes us the same. And what that means is a woman can absolutely run the military-industrial complex and build bombs that are used to kill civilians and children. I'm not at all surprised by this news. This is a really funny, funny circumstance. A lot of people are commenting on it. I've got two stories. This one's from Politico. How women took over the military-industrial complex. And then I have a piece from Caitlin Johnstone at Anti-Media criticizing some of the stories. But let's first read Politico and learn how women have... Look, if the military-industrial complex, it's like these big companies, okay, as of January... Let's just read this. As of January 1st, the CEOs of 4 of the nation's 5 biggest defense contractors, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, and the defense arm of Boeing, are now women. And across the negotiating table, the Pentagon's top weapons buyer and the chief overseer of the nation's nuclear stockpile now join other women in some of the most influential national security posts, such as the nation's top arms control negotiator and the Secretary of the Air Force. Can I just point out, this is great. This is good news, okay? Congratulations to feminism, right? I mean this seriously, that women are now actually in these positions where they're mass producing these weapons, things I typically disagree with, or for the most part do. I understand why we have defense, but bombing civilians and justification for foreign war, and usually not a good thing, but come on, we can accept we have social progress here. Now, obviously, not the social progress that the feminists actually thought was going to happen, because your utopian idealism isn't real, and the reality is, it doesn't matter who's running the company is going to do its thing. What this does is it shows us, no, women in power are not less likely to go to war. We hear this silly talking point from, like, feminists all the time. They're like, oh, if women were in charge, there'd be no war. And it's like, no. Right now, war is only possible thanks to the stunning leadership of these intrepid women who have stood up and risen to the highest ranks of the military-industrial complex. It's a watershed for what has always been a male-dominated bastion, the culmination of decades of women entering science and engineering fields and knocking down barriers as government agencies and the private sector increasingly weigh merit over machismo. Machismo? I don't know how to pronounce that. And as Lockheed Martin CEO Marilyn Houston told Politico, it's also the result of quieting that little voice in your head that doubts whether you can do that next job or take on that next special assignment. And sometimes that special assignment might be a Predator drone and a Hellfire missile being fired at a school. I'm being overly hyperbolic, bear with me. I'm just kidding. That stuff happens though. I think there's critical mass. We have enough women that they're getting noticed, said Rachel McCaffrey, a retired Air Force colonel and executive director of Women in Defense, a career development and networking organization affiliated with the National Defense Industrial Association, a leading industry group. Nearly a dozen female executives and defense leaders who spoke to Politico said having more women at the top affects companies and defense agencies in ways large and small. From questioning stale assumptions about the smartest way to develop weapons and provide services for the military, to negotiating better deals for the taxpayer when buying airplanes, tanks, rockets, and ships, to recruiting and retaining the best and the brightest engineers and policy wonks. And they all contend the nation needs these different perspectives to confront a host of highly complex global challenges on the horizon. I don't disagree with the need for defense. I don't like the idea of the U.S. going into these foreign countries and effectively destroying them for the benefit of the United States. What's happening in Syria is extremely complicated. I'm not going to get into it, but look up the Qatar-Turkey pipeline. It's this long, it's been going on for a while. And there's articles from The Guardian going back to 2009 where the U.S. talked about trying to intervene in Syria because essentially we want our allies to build a natural gas pipeline into Europe. It's complicated. War exists for a reason, right? We don't have, a lot of people might try to convince you that they'll believe that war is pointless, that you have people at the top who simply just engage in war for the sake of war, and that's not really what happens. Now, don't get me wrong, these companies have to sell a product, so war is good for them, but I genuinely believe there is a motivation beyond twirling your mustache and going, yeah, kill civilians. No, they're trying to accomplish something. They think they're doing good. I just think that's wrong, and it's going to cause a lot of problems. The CIA calls it blowback. They say when we go into the Middle East and do these things, then terrorists come to the US and it makes life generally worse. Then we have the refugee crisis, which is the result of the destruction of the Middle East, which is not necessarily our fault. But don't get me wrong, our involvement in Iraq and Afghanistan is resulting in tons of refugees from those countries specifically pouring into Europe. Whole situation is complicated. But I like to look at the root, right? So when it comes to the refugee crisis in Europe, I can say, yeah, maybe they should go to other countries, but the real issue is maybe they should have their own country to begin with. How do we solve that problem? It's multivariate. It's not one thing that caused it. But anyway, back to the main point. Sometimes someone's got to blow something up. And it just so happens the people leading these companies producing the things that can blow something up happen to be women. And it really is good. I think it's funny how they talk about the different perspectives. It's kind of funny. That's literally the diversity narrative. And it's right. Like people who have lived different lives are going to experience different things. And homogenization is typically a bad thing. Here's what you want. You want 100 people. Let's just make up a number off the top of my head, 100 people. And you want all of them to say their ideas so that people can try and figure out what's good and what's bad and get rid of the bad ideas and keep the good ideas. And the more ideas you have, even the more bad ideas, the better off you will be. Don't get me wrong, sometimes the bad ideas slip through, and that is a problem. But typically the good ideas beat out the bad ideas, and then things tend to get better. It doesn't always work out that way, but that's what we can hope for. So, to me, it's a national security issue. We need every mind, every person engaged, male, female, every race, every level of experience, said Lynn Dougal, a former vice president at Raytheon, who is now CEO of Engility, an engineering and IT services firm that did more than $750 million of business with defense and intelligence agencies last year. In the long term, we need to make sure talent wins. It's so rewarding. It's a rewarding merit. It's so rewarding to see diversity affecting the highest levels of the international weapons market. The national security community, more than other fields, generally rewards high performers regardless of color or creed or gender, said Kathleen Hicks, Senior Vice President at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. And this is a good point, and I think I know why. When it comes to inside the safe bubble, right? We've built this very protective bubble around us, and it's very safe here in America. And that means you're allowed to, you don't have to worry about war and conflict, okay? In war and conflict, though, only the best and the brightest will survive. You have to be tough, you have to be smart, you have to be quick-witted. The competition is fierce, and I mean like life competition. Somebody wants to kill you, you gotta kill them first. Whoever's better wins. Okay, there's some you get that advantage, that survives. It's like evolution, right? When it comes to war, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is merit. And that's why it sounds like they're willing to say, I don't care what you look like, where you come from, or what your gender is, can you make me a better bomb? And if you can, you're hired. Whenever you have a meritocracy, you set the playing field to be more level, said Hicks, who also served as Deputy Principal Undersecretary of Defense for Policy in the Obama administration. It's a field that, by and large, is a meritocracy. It rewards merit. Yes, because those that don't succeed die. Obviously, I'm not talking about working in the factory. I'm talking about actual war on the battlefront. But what ends up happening is, there's a reason these companies build weapons, and there's a reason they're going to succeed because they're still part of that chain. If they produce things that are bad, then people won't buy from them. And when it comes to what's good or bad, it's about literally being effective. You don't have the luxury of trying to prioritize diversity over meritocracy. And thus, pure meritocracy, yeah, you're going to see some women sometimes, for sure. You're going to see a decent amount. Now you got the tops of the companies. It doesn't always work that way, but it's certainly a field where results matter significantly. Andrea Thompson climbed the rungs as an Army officer before she was tapped by President Donald Trump to be Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security Affairs, the top diplomat who reviews billions in U.S. arms sales and is responsible for implementing and negotiating international weapons agreements. I tell folks that one of the positive aspects of serving is equal opportunity and equal pay, she said in an interview. Many times I was the only woman in the room, but I was always treated the same. That's great to hear. Who would have thought that the military-industrial complex would be one of the leaders in pushing for diversity? When we look to Harvard, we can see disproportionate amounts of men and women. When we look to STEM, disproportionate amounts of men and women. And the feminists are constantly trying to get women into these roles. But one industry that has succeeded above all others, more quickly, with more women at the top, the military-industrial complex. And you can talk about how this woman says she was always treated the same. Wow. The least amount of bigots, the most amount of women at the top at the highest levels, blowing people up, making bombs. It's fantastic. So they basically go on. I'm just going to read the conclusion here. I think you get the point. Houston, as CEO of Lockheed Martin, says she has made it a priority to recruit more women. Oh, this is good news. I am frequently approached by women at different stages of their careers who tell me that seeing a woman rise to the role of CEO is inspiring and motivating to them. This is immensely gratifying, especially when television and movies often fail to show young girls positive portrayals of women leading and succeeding in the fields of science and engineering. We want this positive trend to continue. We invest in a number of programs to inspire young women to focus on science, technology, engineering, and math in school. We want to encourage more young women to pursue STEM careers so they can help us tackle tough challenges. I think this is great, but not if 10 years from now these women are gone and we're back to having all white men in these positions. It's absolutely fascinating to hear the diversity narrative coming from the military-industrial complex. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually do think it's a good thing. I typically think diversity of opinion and perspective is extremely important. And I think it actually is great to see that that women and minorities have risen to the ranks in some of the most important and prominent companies in the world. I tend not to be a fan of what these companies end up being involved in, but you got to admit, at a certain level, this is a success of intersectional feminism. And the funny thing about it is that so many of these activists are now kind of recoiling when they see their own ideology being parroted back at them from some of the most notorious companies in the world. Because they like to push that narrative, oh, that with intersectional feminism, no more war and no more corruption with socialism, and I'm pretty sure people are going to do the exact same thing they've always done, regardless of their race or gender. They're going to make weapons, and they're going to figure out how to sell those weapons. Congratulations, you've done it. Anyway, stick around. I got more videos coming up. They'll be on this channel.